Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexander Berggruen, and I am thrilled to have you all here joining us today for our curator and artist-led walkthrough of our new group exhibition, curated by Dexter Wimberly. And I would love to introduce Dexter, and then he'll lead us through a wonderful tour with many of the artists in the show who can share a little bit more about their work with you all. So just a little history. You're here at our gallery here on the Upper East Side. We recently hit our 5-year mark, and this particular exhibition marks another special occasion, which is it's our first independently curated show. And I've had the great pleasure of knowing Dexter for the last few years, and he and I have been thinking about and dreaming up this show, and I'm so thrilled with the exhibition he has put together for us, and I'm really excited that he can share a little bit more about how it came together, some of the themes and concepts the show aims to explore, and maybe even some of the more surprising conversations that now exist once the paintings are actually hanging in our space. So without much further ado, I will turn it over to Dexter. He's here visiting from where he's based in Japan, so we're really grateful to have him here in the flesh. And it's really been such a privilege and a pleasure to have you present this show with us, so thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate that. First, I want to thank you for the vote of confidence and trust in giving me the opportunity to organize this exhibition. As you mentioned, this is your first time working with an outside curator. I actually didn't know that when I approached you about doing the show, so I'm glad I didn't know that, because it may have given me a little bit of nervousness about saying, hey, you want to trust me with your baby? But nevertheless, I'm really happy that we've forged this relationship and been able to kind of think through what an exhibition could be and what would be an exciting way to approach it. I mean, group shows are always challenging to put together. I've been a curator for nearly 20 years, and I have to tell you, every project presents its own wonderful opportunities and challenges. This was no different, primarily because there's so many fantastic artists in this exhibition, and to try to determine which works would make the most sense in the show. Also, there's a challenge of figuring out whether or not an artist is going to make a new work, or you're going to choose existing work. And then I'm never one as a curator to try to make unrealistic connections between things. I'd rather have the viewer make their own connections. And so while it is a group show with 7 artists that I believe have a very nice rapport with one another, each artist is doing their own thing. And I'm also really excited about the fact that we have 4 of the artists here today. The name of the exhibition is A Direct Response to Light 21st Century Painting. And you may be asking yourself, why that title? So, well, first of all, every show needs a title. So let's start there. Unlike artists, curators don't get the opportunity to say it's untitled. Tried that once, didn't work out. And so first of all, of course, an exhibition needs a title. But a title is oftentimes something, at least for me, that comes out of my daydreams. Right? I fortunately have a lot of time to daydream, even though I work very hard. And in my daydreams, I think about what are the emotions that I would like to convey or express in any given project that I'm working on. And then I was thinking one day, and I know I'm being a little melodramatic, so just bear with me. I was thinking one day while I was, daydreaming by the ocean, and looking at the light of, the sun reflecting off the water, and realized that if someone had asked me, if someone had never seen a painting before, they didn't know what a painting is, what could I say to them to sort of explain to them what a painting is? And then the phrase, it's a direct response to light, came to me, because I feel pretty confident that without light, there wouldn't be any paintings. Light allows us to see, and seeing allows us to daydream, and allows us to imagine. And so in many ways, I think paintings are also about that. One more thing I'll say before I stop talking is that painting was my first love. I've never been a painter, but when I decided to work in the art world in any capacity, it was paintings that really drew me in. I would go to museums, go to galleries, and literally fall in love over and over and over and over again with paintings. And while I've worked with artists who work in a variety of different media, painting, I always come back to painting. And I think that given all of the technological advances that are happening in the world and all the conversations about everything from AI and on and on and on, I'm a firm believer, I'm an optimist about painting. I think it will stand the test of time. I think there are things you can say and things you can do with painting that you cannot do with anything else. And you mentioned the word in the flesh, me being here in the flesh. There's something about standing in front of a painting in the flesh that is just, you can't duplicate that. It doesn't matter what screen you see it on or what publication you see it in. Seeing that artist's hand and seeing the labor and seeing, in some cases, the joy, in some cases, the pain, the problem solving. I really love the problem solving. I've gotten into that, like looking at a painting very closely and being like, yeah, I know that was a real difficult moment right there to try to figure out how to make that work. And so, without further ado, I'd like to bring Tajh Rust over here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tajh Rust. I'm a visual artist. I mostly work in painting. I'm from New York, born and raised, and yeah, this is my painting.
So this work is titled Undoing.
And Undoing.
And Undoing.
Yes.
And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about, first of all, what was the inspiration for this work?
Yeah. And Undoing is kind of like a continuation of a series of paintings I've been using to explore figures in the process of doing something, not necessarily posing. It's thinking about portraiture in a way to kind of expand what a portrait can be, like thinking about a representation beyond the pose, or like a static, statuesque representation. So this figure is based on someone I met during my travels. I was invited to a gathering, and she was part of the host family, and she felt comfortable enough in the presence of all of us to kind of do this thing where she was undoing her braids, and I wanted to kind of capture that. But it's inspired by that. It's not a direct portrait.
Right, right. And so a couple of things I wanted to know. Like, you're a very soft-spoken person, and one could even say quiet. And there's a similar quality that I see in your work, not just this painting. I mean, obviously I've seen many of your works over the years. And it seems like you are really more interested in that sort of more calm and intimate moment in our lives, as opposed to, as you say, these posed kind of like provocative, in-your-face moments.
Sure. Yeah, I think there is something interesting about intimacy, or trying to capture intimacy. There are so many moments like throughout the day that are these fleeting things that no one would like really think twice about, or can like kind of vanish and are ephemeral in a way. So what I like to do is kind of like stand back a bit sometimes and try to notice things that are often overlooked. And I think this is like one of those things. It's a very intimate act of kind of like transforming, you know, like it's like mid-transformation, but this was done like in public. So I wanted to kind of like capture that and give it more space. Well, I pull from like a lot of references. So all these paintings start out as sketches. I try to think about dynamic compositions. Sometimes I'll look at films and try to capture like, or just try to emulate the way that cinematographers compose frames. You know, what angle are you approaching a room from? You know, thinking about sharp angles and corners and how the figure is situated in a frame or a rectangle. I'll do sketches, and then what I like to do is like make like photocopies of my drawings and try different color compositions. With this one, I wanted to think about warmth, like a very warm temperature. It's been a really cold winter, I know you all know, and I wanted to I wanted to come to the studio and feel like energized. So this painting definitely warmed me up, and yeah, I think that's kind of how these things come to be. With this one, there's like a play with visibility that I'm also interested in. Figures turned away from us. She's kind of like melting into the space as well. So I like that push and pull that you can kind of see in a lot of the other paintings in the show, like this play with visibility.
Great. Thank you so much, Tajh. Thank you.
You know, I think I've always been trying to tell the same story in as many different ways as I possibly can. So a lot of times it is about the female form and breaking that apart and thinking about it, the body in space, in a painting space specifically. And I have very deep formal concerns. And I think I was very figurative when I first started showing. I think I first started showing in 2014 at Jack Hanley Gallery. And I think it's moved to a more obscure kind of area of figuration where the lines are blurred between kind of like, well, is it a body or is it becoming something else? So I think I'm still discovering how I think about that and how I think about the body in a painting space. And it's hard every day. So, and I made these paintings specifically for the show. And I think talking about the idea of light, I am always fighting to keep the light in the work. And I think sometimes when you're working on a painting, you can have the light like on the initial canvas, it's coming out here and it's coming out here. And then as you go and you start making more and more decisions, that light gets hidden and it gets harder to kind of get back to some kind of pure idea of light, the inherent light that happens in a picture. And so then you have to put it in artificially, like with the blue on the shirt. You put something down, you're like, okay, let me try to bring this other idea of light back in. And then, this level of darkness creeps into the work, whether I want it to or not. So it's kind of like a fight to the very end of preserving the initial integrity of the painting, and then losing that battle and trying to fit that light back in somehow. Yeah, and so.
Thank you. When I saw these paintings for the first time, the first thought I had, I was immediately struck by this idea that they exist in the space between figuration and abstraction. Mm-hmm. And depending on how quickly you look, you may not even realize you're looking at a figure, that it has this sort of color blocking and this sort of movement to it that feels a bit sort of as if it's a sort of gestural abstract painting. So how does that work in your thought process about sort of like the formal aspects of the painting?
Yeah, I think what happens is that I mistrust a certain kind of representation that's like a 1-to-1 ratio of something, like, oh, this is a chair, it has to look like a chair in a painting. And I'm like, well, a painting, I'm just using material to create shapes. So I don't know if things have to look like how I perceive them in real life. So I'm always fighting for that. I'm always fighting for a different way to represent the body. And I think, I let myself go in terms of building up the structure of the painting and building it up, tearing it down. And I always say, I think I'm a better editor than painter. I'll throw everything in so I can take it out. And then what's left to me might be interesting because there's a certain negation happening. And the way, like, this painting was really hard because it had a certain structure and it was constantly changing. I think before this was a cutout and then this was just a green layer. And I thought, oh, I kind of like the simplicity, but at the same time, I need something there that I might not understand. Like, I understand negative space, but I wanted something that made me question the idea of space in the work. So it's always a back and forth of the allowance of painting, of being a painter, where you're like, what can I get away with? Right. And then coming back, it's like when you're reading a good novel or you're reading a science fiction and you believe what's happening in the novel because of the world they've created. I think I'm always trying to do something that I can believe in the painting. And so that's why crazy things happen. Yeah. And then I step back and I'm like, am I allowed to do that? Yeah. And usually we are, but it's a matter of standing up for it in the work.
Yeah, I like what you said about things they don't have to have a sort of one-to-one relationship with one another. There are a lot of great photorealist painters that I enjoy seeing their work, but I'm always struck by this idea that once you're able to do that, and you can do it to the point where the human eye can't discern between your painting and a photograph, for example, I'm always struck by this idea that that's an opportunity to then start pulling back and allowing the painting to give some more room for imagination and expression. Now, of course, there always will be people who like real photorealistic painting for sure. Yeah. But from a matter of my own personal taste, I really love the adventure when things start to break down and they don't, to put it bluntly, when they don't make sense.
Yeah. Or it becomes about something else. Or you think of like Taj's work, it's a certain level of intimacy that it's not straight portraiture because it's some interior life that you're representing. And so I always think about that. I think of like the interiority of like paint, what's happening in the painting itself. Sure. So, I mean, that's what I'm interested in.
Can you speak, Heidi, just a little bit about palette and choice of color and maybe a limitation versus a breadth of color in some of your different compositions? How do you think about creating something more uniform versus maybe something a little bit more diverse in terms of color?
You know, I always set up a work with a problem because I guess I like to make things hard on myself. But I think of like, I hate green. I'm like, how do I use green in a way that, you know, I can get behind, or I can think about green in a different way. Or I think of like, I hate this blue. How do I use it in a way that maybe I can abide by? So that's what I do in the painting. I'm like, oh, I hate green, so let me make a green painting.
You do make it hard for yourself.
I do. I'm just like, I think green is ugly, but hey, I'm going to use it because I think it's, I don't know, it's interesting to do those kinds of problems for yourself. And again, I do a lot of glazing, so a lot of that is, the color is built up from many different glazes. So what you're seeing is like not just mixing it on the palette, it's doing very thin washes to create a different kind of experience of that light or of that color. And a lot of times that gets very muddy, so then you have to go back in and bring it back out. It's just a struggle. These works were hard. I think I was still working on them as they were packing them up. You know, it was like, oh well, I guess that's it. You know, and I have to say I'm satisfied. I'm okay. I can live with it. Yeah. So there you go.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dexter. I really appreciate the discussion you've led thus far and the wonderful questions you and our audience have asked of the artists who are here. I'm really excited to show you all this particular painting. It's a new painting by Hulda Guzmán, who is one artist who we represent here at the gallery. And she is from and based in the Dominican Republic. So a lot of her work deals with the natural imagery and the natural surroundings of her world in her immediate midst. But it also, as I can imagine you're seeing, weaves in these sort of surreal and dreamlike narratives of some maybe real animals and some invented animals, spirits, beings from her imagination, from stories of her own, of her family's. And I'm really excited about this particular example in this show. I think you said earlier, Dexter, that there's really quite a breadth of work in the show, and each artist has their own distinct moment in the exhibition. We're lucky to have this painting. It's one painting out of a larger group that Hulda is completing for her first museum solo show opening next month at MASPI in Sao Paulo. This particular scene, it's called The Fire Keeper, really is full of life. It's full of energy and warmth. I think Taj used a great word. We're in this sort of dark, colder winter, especially here in New York. In the Dominican Republic, it's a little warmer, and I think it's great to have the warmth and the spirit of that painting brought here. Hulda is especially known for her landscape paintings. A lot of her work in landscape painting seeks to contextualize the human experience amongst nature, sometimes considering the ways in which it's endangered, sometimes considering the grandeur of nature and having a human presence feel minimized or almost dwarfed in a way compared to the sheer, impressive stature that nature can hold. So here we have these tall, thin palm trees, water and mountain ranges in the distance, and the looming natural light from overhead. In the bottom register, you get the other part of Hulda's work that I think she's especially known for, which are these mixtures of beings that, on my own visits where I've been lucky enough to go down and spend some time with her in the Dominican Republic, there really are wild animals roaming around the land and the hillsides, especially in the north where she's most often based. But then, of course, there are some magical moments, so she's combining aspects of surrealism with magical realism. It's often in Hulda's work that multiple different types of animals come together in a meeting place, often also amidst human figures, as you can see in this particular painting as well. So I think there's an idea about equality, about a gathering and a mutual understanding between different beings, a reverence and a respect for different beings of different types, whether they're human, animal, or imagined. So I think that's part of the idea. I think there's also a visual play where she's using parts of the natural world that are gleaming and illuminated, and human-made fire, for instance, being another light source. I think ties in well with Dexter's show title about light, certainly, and I think that the most intensified animal figure or character from the scene, almost as though it's a stage, is certainly that one. It does stand out. So Hulda is, I believe, in her late 30s, early 40s, thereabouts, based in the Dominican Republic. She works between the capital city in the Dominican Republic of Santo Domingo and then a province in the north, kind of northeast almost, of Samaná. And a lot of the work really deals with her own natural surroundings. She does have a formal education and was classically trained in painting. She's lived most of her life in the Dominican Republic, but has also spent time traveling, I believe, in Mexico and in New York at various points in her career.
As well as Europe?
And Europe, yes, thank you. So I think there are multiple influences from more classical traditional painting, but I would say the biggest influence of all is the life and the immediacy of her surroundings. On those few trips that I've had to visit her, I'll wake up in the middle of the night to two albino horses making noise and neighing, and it's real. You look outside of her windows, and this is the scene.
Thank you. So let's move over here and hear from one of my new favorite people. It's always interesting to organize a group exhibition because there are a lot of surprises that happen. And I recall Alex mentioning Katherine Bradford to me as a possible addition to the show, and I was immediately excited about the prospect, but of course unclear if it could actually happen. But thankfully, Katherine said yes, and she contributed these two fantastic works to the show. Over the course of the past, I would say 6 months, I've been on my crash course of all things Katherine Bradford. And thankfully, this is my third time seeing Katherine in 1 week. So thank you again for participating in the exhibition. And I'd love to just turn it over to you. I'm sure there are quite a few people here who are familiar with your career. But I'd like to just talk a little bit about what's going on in the here and now, and then we can talk about these two paintings.
Thank you all for all of you coming and standing up and listening to us all talk about art. Yes. These two paintings are on themes that I come back to a lot. I've done a lot of water paintings, and I put boats in them, but most times I put swimmers in them. That's something I've returned to again and again. And the circus people, I love to do circus people because you can put bright colors on them. I kind of identify with circus people. They are a little weird. They get paid for being odd, and they're nomadic and have a lot of freedom in their life. This painting is pretty straightforward. You've got a ship and you've got a group of swimmers. But what isn't straightforward is the relationship between these swimmers and the ship. And I haven't solved that because I want it to be open-ended. I want it to be kind of mysterious. To me, there's two ways it could go. This is perhaps their ship, so it's a safe haven. They're out on the sea, and this is their home. Or they've been swimming, and this ship comes by, or just other tourists, or maybe they're pirates and are going to kidnap them and shoot them all. I mean, I love that tension that I've created in this water scene between the boat and the... I was on a swim team when I was in college. I love seeing people all dressed alike standing in a row. You guys are doing a pretty good job, but
I had the good fortune of visiting Katherine in her studio a couple of days ago in Brooklyn. And one of the questions I may have asked you or something you offered about what brought you to the water as a recurring theme in your work. Can you speak about that a bit?
I took a brush, I dipped it in paint, and I slabbered it on the canvas, and it looked like water, even if it wasn't blue. And I like color fields, and I started out as an abstract painter. Perhaps you can tell that. And eventually, I put things in the water. Sometimes it made sense, sometimes it didn't. And I think the circus people were one step away from the swimmers because if you make them skinny, they look like circus people more than swimmers. Anyway, some of my swimmers started to look like circus people, just slipped in there. I would say I'm influenced by a painter like Milton Avery, who likes to whittle things down to a certain essence. And one of you is going to ask me a question, and I'm going to beat you to it. You're going to say, why are the faces blank? And they're not blank. That's all I wanted to say about the faces. I wanted you to pay attention to the shapes, I suppose. But if you notice in this group, Tajh has a face turning away from you so you don't see it. Heidi has an arm coming in front of the face, so the face is somewhat obscured. So I've done that here. I've turned them away from you. Maybe facial features can be distracting. We might hear more about that from Marcus, who puts facial features in. Heidi was talking about layering. No, she wasn't talking about layering. She was talking about, what was the word you used? Glazing. Glazing. Glazing is with oil paint. I'm using acrylics, so someone at the opening asked me how come you did this? I can touch the paintings, right?
Absolutely. That's how we know they're really made by you.
We'll allow it.
I think this is my way of glazing in my own way, of sort of pushing things back and bringing them forward, which is as important as light, or perhaps that's exactly what creates the feeling of light. I love being in a show about light, and I love being in a show that comes right out and says, 21st century. I want to be part of the 21st century.
Well, you very much are, very much are. Thank you, Katherine. One thing I will say about my conversations with her about these particular paintings was that she was very clear about not wanting to resolve the images to the point where it was overstated. And there's something about the way this figure is trapped and intertwined in these ribbons that is sort of reflective of an emotion. And so for you as the viewer, you can sort of parse that out and decide, what is that emotion? Like, what are you feeling? What is this figure going through? And you've had quite a bit of experience working with Nadia, so I'd love to hear from you, Alex, to share not only about these works, but maybe a bit more about Nadia herself.
Happily, yeah. Thank you, Dexter. And yes, so we're in front of Nadia Waheed's two paintings in this exhibition. And in her absence, I'll do my best to do justice to a little bit more about her background. We have had the great experience of working with her in another group show before this, where we also included two of her paintings. Nadia is based in Austin, Texas. And I really like what you were saying about the way in which Nadia leaves certain aspects of a painting for a viewer to complete maybe on their own, in their own interpretation. You were speaking a little bit earlier, Dexter, about photorealism and how that explores a point of connection between a painterly approach to recreating a photographic image. Here, for instance, there are certain realist aspects of the work, but parts of it are left very painterly, and parts of it are even more about drawing. I love the subtle moments, like the flower here that's interwoven into this grid work that Nadia uses for her composition. I also really like that there's an abstract nature of this painting. There's, a background that starts to fill out in shapes and, again, leaves the viewer to complete their own conclusions. And I think, to your point, again, there's quite a range of how figuration within this show can give way to abstraction, and I think this is a prime example.
Well, what's also interesting, I'll add before you speak about the next work, and it kind of connects to something Katherine had, pointed out. Here again, we have a face that is obscured, right? And this isn't something that was a curatorial decision insofar it was each artist's own decision. Wow. And so that kind of tells me something about what people are thinking and how they're feeling about not necessarily identity to the extent of race or gender, but identity in terms of humanity and sort of not needing to show someone's face to show their humanity.
I did want to touch upon the smaller painting by Nadia as well, as I think it's a further exploration of something I've really enjoyed and seen in a lot of her work with narrative, but also with symbols. And we've talked a little bit about geometry in various paintings. We spoke about geometry in Heidi Hahn's paintings especially. To me, this is an interesting mix of harder edge geometry with more natural symbols of the human body and these open hands reaching toward the viewer.
I also love the mystical, sort of magical nature of this sort of crystal ball, snow globe, not quite sure what it is. I think it feels really good with Hulda's work. It kind of really has a nice connection in terms of that sort of mystical realm that they're existing in. So really thrilled that Tunji is participating in this exhibition. This is the first time this painting is being shown, and it's an honor that he was able to make it happen. I know that similar to Hulda and Nadia, you've had an ongoing relationship with Tunji over the years in terms of being a supporter of his work, and also we both know him. So I'd love to kind of get your take on this work, and then I'll give you my take.
Well, thank you, Dexter. Yeah, so this is a painting by Tunji Adeniyi-Jones, and we are indeed thrilled to have it in the exhibition. I first saw Tunji's work when I used to live in the Lower East Side on Broome Street, and he had his first, I believe it was his first solo show in New York following his time, I think at Yale, where he received his MFA at Nickel Beauchesne Gallery. And I was just immediately taken with his work. At the time, the work tended to be a little bit more full body figure oriented, and over time I think it's leaned a little bit more into an organic sense of patterning and geometric arrangement, color relationship compositions, and it's just been a thrill to see him grow over these years. I was especially excited to see a very direct correspondence and resonance of the painting we have here and a large format painting he presented in the Nigerian pavilion at the most recent Venice Biennale. So it's really a treat to have a work in conversation with that body of work. To me, this is a type of painting where the more you look, the more you get in terms of all the subtleties of smaller choices of color, of the way in which he renders each figure's eyes, and how there's a correspondence between some of the natural plant-like shapes that make up the background of the composition and human figurative forms. And I think that's just another continuation of an exploration of the relationship between figure and nature that we're starting to see quite a bit in this show, whether it's someone like Nadia and thinking of that orb that has the almost black and white sort of cinematic remembered piece of landscape underneath of which there are the human hands, or someone like Hulda who has the animals and human figures in conversation with the nature around her in the Dominican Republic. So I think there's, to me, one of the most exciting things about working on this show with you is after selecting the artists, seeing what works they contributed, and then having some of those conversations emerge more naturally and points of comparison that our audience here has really also helped to bring to life. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I recently had a conversation with Tunji about his work in general and these figures, and was trying to sort of unpack the significance of the figures, whether they were meant to be female or male or to have no sort of gender in that way, whether they were meant to be human beings or meant to be deities. And the answer is sort of yes. That it is all of those things. Certainly influenced by his connection to Yoruba traditions, and also thinking about the connection between humans and nature. I love the fact that this painting is a bit of a storm. There's this whirlwind of flora, this whirlwind of limbs and bodies, and it's completely disorienting. And I think that is something that you see often in his work, that it's not quite clear which way is up, which way is left, which way is right. There's a certain center to the work for sure, but one could imagine seeing this painting in sort of any orientation and it still having its effect. I also love the fact that he's sort of working within this really tight range of oranges and yellows, and then suddenly you get these greens that just transform your depth perception as well. And whether that green is meant to represent more leaves, or maybe that is your opportunity to see past the leaves. Not that the sky would be green, but it could be a way to see the sky, but it could be. Right, could be. So I really wish that all the artists that were not present could have been present, because it's always wonderful to hear what an artist was thinking about in that moment of making the work. But I did have the opportunity to visit Tunji's studio just before the Venice Biennale, where he was finishing up the work that's sort of part of this series. So I got a sneak peek of that work, and it was in my mind that wouldn't it be great if a work like that could be in this show? And lo and behold, it actually happened. So I really, really do appreciate that he went the sort of like extra mile to make sure that we could have this work in the show. Marcus, thank you for participating in the exhibition.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marcus Jahmal. I'm a painter from Brooklyn, New York. And as far as the works for the show, these were kind of from a series that I was working on for a solo presentation last Basel, Miami. It was entitled Block Party, which kind of, if you grow up in New York and Brooklyn specifically, it's like an important part of community and bringing people together. There'd be a lot of barbecues and kids playing basketball in the middle of the street and things like that, but also there was like cops and some also negative elements. And so I decided to call the series that I showed in Miami Block Party. And so this was a departure from that series. So I worked on it slightly after that, and also like right during like the election times and everything like that. And so it's made up of like certain like reoccurring motifs that like umbrellas and like smokers, which is like an homage to like art historical references of like painters who depict smoke, like Philip Guston. And umbrellas is just something like I like the shape of it, and I kept kind of repeating it, and it kept like, they morphed into different things. But I think that as a painter, like I kind of paint things that I'm kind of missing or wanting in my life. For me, it's like coverage and kind of like vulnerability and kind of like painting things that I want to see in my life. But also at the same time, I like painting figures that have like some kind of uniform. So like maybe it's like a suit or like a police uniform or something that kind of characterizes them, kind of like Catherine's swimmers or her circus figures. And so as I painted this one with the guy with the suit, I kind of was thinking like, he kind of looks like a politician in a way, and it was also very timely. And then the umbrella with the red and white and the blue sky kind of reminded me of like red, white, and blue, like obviously like the country's colors and the election happening. So I was like thinking like, although I didn't intend to paint anything that was about the election, it kind of just happened. And I was like, the umbrella is kind of disheveled, and it's kind of like this guy, he's like a day walker. It's kind of like he's walking into kind of a new regime that's kind of troubled. And so I thought that was interesting because it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't intended, but it kind of was just, it just came out like that. And
Can you talk a bit about the composition, the use of brick?
I mean, maybe it's like just growing up in a city, like in the inner city, like that's something that you just see all the time. Like I started painting like a lot of interior scenes and landscape scenes, and kind of like cityscapes are kind of new for me. But brick is definitely something that makes up the city, and like kind of like this pre-war kind of motif of any architecture that you see. And I kind of like, I'm just drawn to it. And the colors is very earthy, and color is another important aspect of my work. I like to limit my palette and use like tones. This painting became a diptych. At first it was just the top portion, honestly. And I decided I wanted to extend it, and that happens sometimes. Like a lot of times the paintings morph, and like even like with editing, I edit stuff down a lot. I don't like too many things going on in the works. I like them to be more focused, and I think I'm more of a physical painter as well, meaning I paint more with my arm than my wrist. Therefore, you get like bigger marks, and I use bigger brushes. I don't like to use small brushes. And it's just a very physical, very rough kind of painting, and it's usually like really layered as well. Like this one had like many different colors under the blue. It was like green before, and like different like yellow. It was like, it kind of just, it's kind of like this exercise in the studio where I'm like trying to find a balance for myself. You know, I might leave the studio one day and I really like what's going on, and I'll come back the next day and I'm like, I don't like it. You know, I'll just have to change it. Of course, until like it have a deadline and it has to go out. You know, that kind of helps me to finish, to be honest, like, because I kind of feel like a painting is never done until it goes out of the door.
The decision to have the main figure in this painting smoking, and then what that allows you to do with the smoke, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's also about directing. Like I kind of think about, you know, the viewer's gaze in the eyes, and it's a way for it to come down from here and go up, and then into this area here where you have the umbrella, and then you have this line that goes down into the hand, and it's kind of like a whole direction that's going on, kind of like in a circular motion. And a lot of my works are like that, where it's like I'm directing the viewer in a way. It's interesting because you were talking about like obscuring the face and the features in a lot of these works, which I didn't notice at first. But I mean, that's something I think like post-pandemic was kind of a thing. You started seeing all these people wearing face masks and kind of emphasis on the eyes. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of like dehumanizing in a way. And this one's called Animal Eyes. And I thought his eyes looked kind of like an animal, and kind of like the same as the umbrella, like these things that kind of are covers for something, and kind of like feeling vulnerable and wanting to cover it in a way. And so, and then I just found it fun to paint these figures with these masks on. You know, I've done plenty of them now, and it kind of draws your focus in certain ways. When we talk about features with Kathy, and like she doesn't paint any features, and I do, but even with the features, like I painted like glasses on that guy because I don't want you to focus on the eyes so much as this one. But it's kind of like I'm like directing the focus in a way, like because you automatically want to look at the eyes.
And so that concludes the artist/curator talk.
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you all for being here, and especially to the artists who are participating in this show. We were really lucky to have 4 of them here with us today to share their own words about their work. So thank you again to Tajh, to Heidi, to Katherine, and to Marcus. And of course, we're thrilled and wish that Nadia and Tunji and Hulda could have also been with us, but really thrilled that you were able to see their work here in person. The show runs through April 9th, and we encourage you all and any friends to come back and visit us. We're open from Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 6. And I wanted to finally thank Dexter one more time. And I think we should give a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
One last thing is it's always a team effort, and I always really appreciate being able to thank my colleagues too. So to Kirsten Cave and to Sophia Turner, thank you so much for everything. You make everything run smoothly and seamlessly.
Absolutely.
So yeah, come visit us. Thanks again, Dexter. Thanks to all the artists and to all of you for visiting and your great questions. Enjoy.